And my motivation was to learn new things, learn new languages, cultures. I was very curious. And at the end of the journey so far, I would say the main takeaway is how similar humans are all around the world. The most unique experience was less about the place and more about the accident. So, for example, I lost my passport in Uzbekistan. Another time, it was in Spain, but I had pretty much everything I owned stolen.
Right.
So I was on a train as well, and while I was distracted, someone took my suitcase, and I lost a lot of my belongings, my passports, my laptop. Travel is something which cannot be substituted by just watching films or just reading books. They are climbing the same mountain from a different side. I would think that traveling is one of the most important investments for young people.
He is fellow at ERIA School of Government, as well as founder of 10billions.org. He is an expert at AI governance, economy, as well as technology.
Yeah, so I think first is that the economic development level is not a determinant of the success of democracy. The first, which kind of created the idea of existential threats, is nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Where thermonuclear hydrogen bombs are so much more capable, thousands of times more capable than the nuclear bombs used in 1945. The second is public health dangers from pandemics. And then the third, I think it depends, right? Like for AI or climate change, big countries have a long history of invading small countries. And I'm not saying specifically because it's in this region of the world. I'm saying as a matter of principle, the majority of the world lives in small countries. And individually, they are relatively weak and irrelevant compared to large countries. But collectively, they're very relevant. And they failed to defend their interests. People became complacent. They started to focus a lot more on what helps me as an individual instead of what helps my community, my country. What's important is to be grounded. Like, who am I as a person? What can I do? Who do I know? Why, instead of giving the poor housing, food, and healthcare, you take the money and give it to the richest people?
Hi everyone, welcome to Hive Intelligence Podcast with me, Romora Edward Sitorus. Today, I'm very excited to meet my friend, my colleague, someone who worked with me in daily basis, Joël N. Christoph. How are you, bro?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm very well. Happy to be here.
Happy to be with you, man. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
Joël is my friend. He is fellow at ERIA School of Government, as well as founder of 10billions.org. And he is also Harvard Kennedy School Carr-Ryan Center Fellow. He is an expert at AI governance, economy, as well as technology. And today we are going to ask you a lot of things about existential threat, global fragmentation, and etc. Because as we know, we are in a very interesting time nowadays where many things is happening together, like military escalation and then wars everywhere, AI race between US and China, and many of the audience are interested in what should they do. Is this going to be the World War III? Is it going to be an existential threat to humanity? Will humanity survive this? Or we will extinct? So this is a very interesting question that I would love to ask you, and I know you are very good. You have a very good understanding at these topics. But before that, I I want to know you closer. Joel, you are born as Japanese as well as French. Your mother is from Japan and your father is France. Um, Very unique, and you live in 10 countries for quite some time in each countries, and 76 countries you have visited. So you are a global citizen, right? Can you share your experience and how you manage to visit so many countries, and why do you do that?
Sure. So I indeed have family from two countries. I grew up in two other countries, and then as an adult, I chose to live, study, or work in six other countries. So that's how I ended up moving around, mostly by my own organization. So I applied to study and work in new countries, and my motivation was to learn new things, learn new languages, cultures. I was very curious, and at the end of the journey so far, I would say the main takeaway is how similar humans are all around the world.
Oh,
We tell a lot of stories about what makes us different, what divides us, but ultimately I think we have far more in common across countries, especially when people think about the hopes they have for themselves, their families, their friends. There's a lot of similarity. And if there's one way that it's shaped me, I think it might be my openness to new experiences. So, for instance, if someone were to say, "Hey, we have a opportunity for you on the other side of the world, very different culture and language," many people might say, "Oh, I'm not so sure. I have a lot of difficulties adapting." But for me, I see it as a positive, exciting opportunity to adapt, to learn, to grow as a person.
right.
And it's also similar to learning new languages, where the more you practice the process, the easier it becomes. Same with moving to a new country. If I move to a new country, I pretty much divide my time so that I make sure to do everything I want to do.
Right.
And a lot of the bureaucracy, it's fairly simple these days. You have
Okay.
phones, internet, translation. It's a lot easier to move to new countries than in the past. So for me, it's been a great experience.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Interesting. So meeting with so many people, visiting those countries, although you mentioned that everyone have common interests, they're having similar or commonality everywhere. Um, which countries would you wish to stay longer if you could?
Well, if life was long enough, there'd be so many. So the first is that I find it particularly exciting to go to new countries
Right.
that I haven't been before. But among those I have been to, it's similar. The countries that were the most different to what I'm used to. So I grew up mostly in Western Europe. As a result, countries in Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, Ethiopia, I found was very different. And I learned a lot about how resourceful and entrepreneurial people have to be to get by. But also how much political systems lead people to live very different lives.
Right.
So in a lot of communist regimes, the way the society was organized was quite different, and also how people thought about the freedoms that they had as a human being. So I think that all the countries that have had different histories, even if they have by now converged, for example, the former Yugoslavian countries like
Yeah.
Albania, it's super interesting because you can see how, for example, the intelligence services worked, how the economy was structured very differently to like a market economy.
For example?
Yeah, like Albania,
Yeah.
Serbia, also Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan.
Okay.
I would say Central Asia is the most interesting region in one sense, in that it was both former Soviet Union,
Right.
Islamic, and has been kind of a place with so many mixed influences, Turkic influences, Islamic, Chinese, Soviet. So it's a mix of cultures like
Right.
few other places.
Right. I see. Very interesting. do you have any memorable stories in those countries? For example, I see that you have gone to countries like Albania, which has transformed from maybe socialist to more market based. Uh, how does it looks? What are the most interesting thing that you experienced there?
Yeah, so I would say the most unique experience was less about the place and more about the accident. So, for example, I lost my passport in Uzbekistan.
Right.
And so I couldn't leave the country, and I was meant to fly to another country a few days later. But I also couldn't stay at any hotel because you need your passport to check in. So I had to go to a police station to report that I
Right.
lost my passport.
Yeah.
And they didn't believe that I had a French passport. They said, wait a minute, you don't look very French. So I speak a very little bit of Russian, and I had to use it to try to explain. And the amazing thing is that they found my passport on the other side of the country,
Yeah.
at a train station that I departed from to go to the capital city. So essentially, I had lost my passport before getting on the train.
Yeah.
And they managed to get the passport from the other side of the country to the capital to give it to me just in time to go to the airport. So I was able to continue my journey and my life. But I think a lot of the experiences where
That's amazing.
another time it was in Spain, but I had pretty much everything I owned stolen.
Right.
So I was on a train as well, and while I was distracted, someone took my suitcase, and I lost a lot of my belongings, my passports, my laptop, and then I have to adapt. So I just accept the reality, think of what I need to do, solve the most important problems, and I think it's given me a lot of reassurance that no matter how bad things get, whether there's a war, loss of electricity or drinking water, we have to stay calm, solve the problem, cooperate with others, and think about ways to always tackle the root causes of the problems that actually matter instead of getting panicking, distracted. Yeah.
Wow, man, that's very interesting story. If I were you, I would already panic, man, and call my family maybe. Yeah. So you also, as you mentioned, you speak Russian,
A little tiny bit.
a little tiny bit. You speak multiple language.
Yeah.
What are they?
So I speak, in order, what I learned was Dutch, Japanese, French, English, German, Spanish, Mandarin Chinese, Italian. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot of language, man. And I saw in your LinkedIn you read in Chinese.
Yeah, so I studied Chinese every day for more than 1 year. I was very disciplined. The first thing I would do every morning when I woke up was
Right.
do my Chinese study. And then I studied and interned in China as well, in Beijing.
Oh, where did you study in China?
So I studied, first I went for a summer course for language studies. So this
Right.
was near Shanghai. And then I did a graduate program at Tsinghua University.
Right.
And then I also continued to study, but an online program at Peking University, which is also in Beijing.
Wow.
And I think it was particularly important for me, someone growing up in a Western country, because there's so much propaganda about what China's like.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the people to people in China and other places, they're very similar. In terms of how the country is organized, it's not at all like, some people say it's like a backwards dictatorship, but actually a lot of people, they much prefer how the country has progressed over the last generation than any previous generation. So I think people need to understand the nuance of China's development.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, there are so many people have ignorance about what foreign countries looks like. Like maybe myself, if I do not travel to abroad for my study, I might have different ideas about Western countries like United Kingdom or the US. Do you think travel really helps people to, like you said, people to people experience? Does it really help people to to have a better mindset about how to have a peace between among everyone?
I think it's an opportunity, but not a guarantee. In some sense, what we do as individuals is not going to prevent the decisions of politicians who never meet us, not so much. But I think it helps in the sense that if you travel to a foreign country, eventually you will face a problem.
Yeah.
And someone who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't owe you anything, might save your day and they might save your life. And that can open up your eyes to the compassion and this idea that every human being is fighting a hard battle and that we are all here on this earth to help each other get through this life, whatever it is. And this kind of realization, I think, is a lot more likely when people break out of their day-to-day routine. If people go to the same workplace every day, same people every day, same conversations every day, they won't notice what it means to be human beyond the bubble that they're in. So in that sense, I think travel is something which cannot be substituted by just watching films or just reading books. They are climbing the same mountain from a different side. But I would think that traveling is one of the most important investments for young people.
Right. Thank you, Joel. Very interesting. I like travel so much. Not only abroad but also domestically. I learned that you have already traveled Indonesia.
Yes.
Can you tell a story about what city in Indonesia do you like the most? What food do you like the most?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I've mostly traveled in Java Island. I went to Bandung, Yogyakarta, Surabaya, Banyuwangi, Malang. I went to Mount Bromo, Mount Ijen. I went to the temples near Yogyakarta. So I tried to see a lot of places, and most of these I visit by train. I love traveling by train. I think that it's a beautiful way to see the landscapes outside of the cities as well. But I hope to travel more because Indonesia is one of the most diverse countries on earth. And I think there's very little knowledge about this outside of the region.
Right.
So hopefully there will be time for visiting other parts as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, I hope you travel more. I saw that you have collaborated with many NGO in Indonesia. Really appreciate sharing your experience with many young people in Indonesia. Really appreciate that, Joel. I would like to know about 10billion.org. You are the founder of this organization. Why do you found this organization? What is the goal? And what is the impact that you have reached or accomplished so far?
Sure. So I would say the goal is to get people to think about what we have to do during our lives to make the lives of virtually all of us humans better. Because a lot of people, they focus on the individual myself. They think of my job and my family. And that's okay. But there are important problems which we cannot solve alone, which no single country government can solve. But if we did solve them, we would all be able to have a better life. So the most obvious example is preventing World War III and nuclear war, but also things like preventing pandemics and health crises, making sure that technology gets developed in a way that allows us to maintain control over the future.
Right.
And right now, nobody is in charge on a global level, but that doesn't mean that we can't make progress.
Right.
And it starts not with policy papers or with like a narrow government policy. It starts with identity.
Okay.
Getting people to understand, I am one human being, but there's now 8.2 billion, maybe later this century, up to 10 billion more or less of human beings. And there will never be more than that, given how demographics are developing. But if I share the idea that we should try to create a world that works better for all of us, and other people agree and they resonate, over many years, basically over our whole life, the next 50 years plus, we can organize to do things which previous generations failed to do. So one example is reforming the United Nations. Pretty much everybody agrees on reforming the United Nations. People disagree on what that means.
Can people like us reform the United Nations through your organization?
Well, I would not go as far as to claim it's through the organization. It's so very small. But I think it's more of a question of if we as people that are paying attention and that care are not going to do it, who is going to do it?
Okay.
I mean, a bus driver that's struggling to feed their family doesn't have the luxury to care about these things. So I think what we need to do is to get the people in the world living in different countries, I would claim there's at least millions and millions of them all around the world, who understand the problems and understand that they can't be solved by one country alone, to start cooperating better, and even in terms of process, build the infrastructure, the organizations, the networks, so that our generation will be better at solving these problems than the previous generations.
Right.
And people will disagree about all kinds of things. These days, politicians disagree on all kinds of interpretations. But what should be the goal is that if virtually 99.9% of humanity will benefit from us doing a certain thing,
right,
why should we not do it? In a democracy, that wouldn't work, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying the world is a democracy or a country, but I think it's still important that we create the infrastructure to do the things that would make the lives of almost all of us better off.
Yeah.
And what exactly that means in like practice, concrete,
right,
that's up to discussion.
Okay.
But right now, it's a strange situation because you talk to pretty much any human being in the world and you
right,
ask them, hey, do you think we should avoid World War III? They will say, of course. But then you ask them, do you think we're doing enough to avoid it? They say no.
Yeah.
And so this contradiction will continue as long as the people who are paying attention don't realize that they can organize themselves to improve our own future lives.
Yeah. Okay. So, very interesting. So, you're saying that even though it might be hard to think that we can actually change the situation, we should still do it, because if not us, who will do it?
That's right. And I think there's many reasons why, if not us, who will do it. The first is indeed the luxury of people who are able to understand these ideas, to pay attention. They have the time. They maybe can discuss these things in English with people from other countries. Another is simply the point in history. Things like the diffusion of AI, climate change. The future generations won't have the same freedoms to influence the future as we do. They will have inherited far more constrained environments. They won't be able to undo technological progress. So there is some urgency there as well. But I think a very unique angle that the name 10 billion alludes to is that 10 billion might be the maximum number of human beings there will ever be.
Why is it?
Because according to the United Nations population prospects, because people are having fewer and fewer children on average, we are approaching a peak of around 10 billion human beings. And that's up from roughly 1,225 years ago. But the important aspect is that, what does it actually mean for human progress? It means that we will never again have more potential in terms of numbers. Human beings, brains, smart people, kind people, cooperating, sharing stories, helping each other to understand what it means to exist as a human being in this universe. 200 years from now, there might be far fewer human beings. And they will look back at this, they will say, this was the golden age. There were never more people, never more young people, never a more stable climate, never more opportunities to cooperate before a Third World War. So because we're in the middle of the river, we don't notice that we're surrounded by this river of opportunity. But that's why we have to change the story that we tell each other.
Right.
Instead of telling a cynical and passive story of, oh, things are going bad, I'm pessimistic about the future, and there's nothing I can do about it, people should flip the script and say, things are not going as well as we'd like, but they can be better. And virtually every single human being I will meet will agree face to face that we should do the things that will make it better.
I see.
And I think right now it's again a contradiction, because the dominant story is one of being passive, of not believing we can change things and improve things. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if we don't start by spreading the story that this is our identity, we exist as human beings to make the lives of ourselves and our future selves in particular better, then it will be hard to develop the coordination signals.
Right.
So I think it is basically almost like a humanist identity that I think we should pay attention to. It's not a replacement for any other identity. It's more like an addition. That you can be from one village, from one country, from one region, but also understand that there's people on the other side of the world who might interpret the reality in a very different way. When we agree, we should consider actually doing the things we agree on doing.
I see. Very interesting, Joel. I think you make a very good point where we should continue to realize that there is a river of opportunity, as you said, that we can use to prevent any nuclear war or any World War III that might happen. I'm just very interested about uh, 10 billion. What kind of channel do you use to 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 help people to make things happen through 10 billion?
Yeah, sure. So we try several different channels.
Yeah.
One is more educational materials. We have a Substack newsletter. We've done episodes on YouTube and on a Spotify podcast. We also have a community. So a Slack community has around 250 members in
Wow.
around 40 different countries. We also have in-person meetups. So far, we've had them in London, Berlin, Jakarta, in Cape Town soon, also in Japan and
Yeah.
Singapore. And we also have individual projects. So, for example, we had a renewable energy project in Malawi. We have a refugee integration project in Japan.
Yeah.
And most of the time, we collaborate with another local organization, but we try to bring stakeholders together. So,
Right.
established NGOs, people that want to volunteer,
Yeah.
people that can provide resources. And I think the
How do you get financing for those
to be honest,
projects?
pretty much everything is volunteer run. So we have
Oh.
we have virtually no expenses. A lot of the things that do cost money, I've covered myself for my own funds. But for example, when we have a meetup, so far we have always obtained venues for free.
Yeah.
Because they saw we were trying to help other people. We also received equipment or donations for things like coffee at an event. And then we received also a lot of in-kind support from partner organizations.
Oh.
So organizations that have venues or that can provide, let's say, recording equipment, they will donate it for a particular event or opportunity. And I think that's actually very important because once you start being dependent on financing, someone else can set your agenda.
That's
But
true.
if you don't even need financing,
Right.
then you don't need to bend your approach to satisfy the funders.
I see.
And so that's why what's very important is that we shouldn't do good things and be good human beings just because someone else pays us to. It's actually the opposite. I only work with people who want to do the right thing and to work with other people who might live very different lives, but who agree that we have to solve these problems instead of kicking the can down the road forever. And I think nuclear weapons is actually one of the heaviest topics in this domain because I think a lot of people have not yet realized that being in a world where nuclear weapons exist, but that they are never used, is actually not necessarily stable.
Yeah.
In my view, especially since the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, no country with nuclear weapons will get rid of them. So what that implies is that, in my view, if that assumption is correct, nuclear weapons will be kept until they will be used. When they will be used, there will be escalation. And when there will be escalation, there will be hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people that die.
Wow.
Including on the other side of the world through nuclear winter and all these kinds of things. Again, this is just one scenario. It could be different. But I think this is particularly important because nuclear war might not happen in our lifetime.
Right.
But if we knew now that it's going to happen in the lifetime of our children,
Right.
then in advance, we would try to do everything possible to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's not what we're doing. So there's all these kinds of problems which, if people paid attention to them, they would realize this is far more serious.
Yeah.
But there's many different reasons why we aren't making progress.
I see. Wow. Yeah, I saw that you have a very long vision about humanity, and I think 10 billion is a very interesting project and organization of yours. People in Cape Town, Singapore should look out, for the next meeting, and please join. The website is
It's the number 10 followed by the word billion.org.
okay, and the Instagram.
It's at 10 number 10 word billion word future. So at 10 billion future.
Okay, yes, please follow, and don't forget to join this because this organization is led by Joel. I think Joel is an amazing individual who have a great intention and also very hardworking on making sure that we try our best to save humanity. Right.
Well, also not just stop the negatives, increase the positives.
Right.
I mean, maybe 200 years from now, people will look back on our time and say, I can't believe how cruel we were to each other, to let so many people struggle in poverty, so many people die prematurely from diseases that could be prevented. So what's very well possible is that actually the future will be bright, and it will be so bright and positive that people will not understand how we failed to reduce suffering for so long, but also to improve our lives. All the breakthroughs ahead of us in healthcare, if we can help people to suffer less and live better lives, we should do it. But that's not the story we tell about humanity.
Right. Very interesting. I want to jump to your work as a Harvard Kennedy School Fellow. I saw your profile and you write some theory describing governance, etc. Can you tell us what did you do and what kind of issues or problem do you want to tackle as a Harvard Fellow?
Yeah, sure. So we have discussions on many different types of topics, but my primary project is about how digital technology is affecting human agency and participation in society. So one example is that when the printing press was developed, it enabled both good ideas to spread, but also fake ideas to spread and to cause a lot of violence, inciting violence, these kind of things. And you could say the same with radio. The use of the radio was very important for fascist dictators. And now, beyond the internet, with generative AI, it's similar. We can use these things for good things or for bad things. The tools in themselves don't dictate it. And this is also becoming dangerous because increasingly, as the cost of computation has fallen and the amount of data collection has increased, we are collecting so much information on every human in the world that it becomes a very easy choice to decide to coerce people. So, for example, all the information that's collected about us on where you went, when, who you wrote, what messages you're sharing on social media, people think to themselves, oh, it's fine, like nobody's ever going to care. The thing is, most people, that's true. Unless you become powerful or wealthy or you make some enemies, and then they have a treasure trove of information to cancel you, to make sure that you are no longer able to live the life that you expected to live. And this is why things like privacy are actually a lot more important than people realize in the short term. Because once you give up your privacy and you give up your ability to prevent this kind of blackmail, coercion, and so on, you are actually increasing the risk that your life will get canceled. And so in terms of an information civilization where we're collecting so much more information on what every human being is doing, I think it can be used for good, like trying to give people what they want at a lower price and so on, but also for bad. And I think especially the advancement of digital dictatorships and the restrictions on human agency and the ability of people to have a say in what ideas get spread through society, this is very problematic. So specifically this idea of who gets to decide what ideas become mainstream, that is a question that concerns me a lot. Because before AI and before social media, you could say that it was never democratic. Like, it's not like we voted on which ideas become mainstream. Instead, you had gatekeepers. You had the TV presenters, the newspaper editors, journal editors. They have a certain taste or preference over information, and that gets cascaded down. Now it happens through algorithms. Anyone can participate, but that also means that most people's opinions are not represented in a serious sense. So
why is it so?
Because the algorithm has to reveal a preference on which kind of content gets promoted more or less. And since it's profit maximizing for engagement, it means that it's not necessarily the ideas that would help us to live the best lives and to get along that get promoted. It's maybe the complete opposite. And a lot of people will privately understand this, but if you want to challenge the way the system works, then how are you actually going to spread the idea? You have to actually spread it through these platforms. So I think in some sense, we have had a big trade-off. On the one hand, we have access to a huge amount of free content, some of it very high quality. Think about the documentaries and all that. On the other hand, we have given up a huge amount of freedom over how people can share ideas beyond their family and immediate small network with the rest of the world, especially ideas that would actually help make the world better. Because now you can pay for ads But even if you pay for ads, certain ideas probably are going to get shut down. And I think the amount of concentration of power in a very small number of people who get to decide which ideas go global and which don't is itself very dangerous for the future of human civilization.
Wow. It's very interesting. I feel like I share many of my personal pictures in social media. For me, I feel like it's okay because I don't think it will be used in a bad way. But you yourself, I don't see you share many of your personal pictures or mostly works. Is it because you are afraid, like you said before, it might be used to cancel your expected future, something like that?
Not really. I mean, if I really wanted to remove all information, I wouldn't have any information public.
Right.
But it's more so that...
Is it possible to do that now?
I think once it's out there, it's hard to remove because you have all kinds of crawlers and information getting copied elsewhere. But let's say in the European Union with GDPR, the European Union has tried to make it a legal requirement that you have a right to have your data deleted.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think this is actually, again, we're fixing the roof while it's raining, or we're fixing the engine while the car's going. So all of these questions about technology, privacy, human rights, is very complicated because we have to try to find the right kind of regulation while the technology is being developed and diffused. So the dust hasn't settled.
Right.
But no, for me, the main reason I don't share that much other stuff is simply because I spend so much more of my time thinking about these kind of problems that I don't think to myself, let me share a photo of me doing other things. It just doesn't come to my mind. Yeah.
Right. Joël, thank you for describing many of your personal story about your work in Harvard and in 10 billion. You are currently a fellow at ERIA School of Government. You come to ASEAN and in particular Jakarta to become a fellow. How does it go so far, and what kind of problem are you trying to tackle during your fellowship here?
Yeah. So in terms of how it's gone so far, I've loved it. I've learned so much. I think that, both what is similar and what's different, you get so much nuance and detail when you live in a new place and you work with new people. In terms of the problem that I focus on, a lot of it is about what should ASEAN and also more generally the Asian community do about AI governance and technology governance, which is partly a question of what is even possible, because a lot of them would say, well, the US and private companies will make all kinds of decisions about AI. That's partly true. But then the other thing is also about what is possible in terms of internal will.
Yeah.
What are the countries who have very different histories, priorities, and political systems able and, more importantly, willing to do to create, for example, a common negotiating position? So I focus a lot on governance proposals, the incentive design, and a lot of it is motivated by the fact that in terms of helping humanity, Southeast Asia, ASEAN, it is one of the largest communities of human beings. There's more people than in the European Union, for example, or in the US. And at the same time, there's very little research about what should this community of people do to improve their position when it comes to new technologies being developed and deployed. And I think, to keep it simple, there's 3 proposals. The first is that a lot of the capabilities between countries are very different. So Singapore and Myanmar, they have very different capabilities. And there are certain things like cybersecurity where the weakest link needs to be strengthened for the overall region to be better off. Then the second aspect is also that countries have very different interests. Some want more integration, some less. And it's important for the countries that want to integrate more to be able to do so if the benefits are clear and it doesn't harm others. So I think a path of coalitions of the willing moving ahead to create clubs where they have internal benefits, like better market access, and then creating incentives for the others to join later on and have the same access to the benefits. This is one way that things can be governed well.
Yeah.
There's a couple other approaches that I develop in my writing, but basically it's about these kind of questions about what should Southeast Asia do, but starting from what is even possible.
Okay, very interesting. Now we are going to another topic. Yeah. As I told you in the beginning, many people feel really pessimistic about the future peace in this world because there are so many things going on. AI war, physical war, tariff war that could actually destroy what we have built so far, the multilateralism, the globalization, etc. Talking about existential threat, can you tell what are the top 3 existential threat currently might happen? Maybe AI war, and or the other might be nuclear. What kind of 3 scenarios that can threat our existence?
Yeah, sure. So first, different people will have different opinions.
Yeah.
The second is that when we say what are the current ones, we need to focus on present technologies, not speculative future ones.
Okay.
So the first, which kind of created the idea of existential threats, is nuclear weapons.
Okay.
Where thermonuclear hydrogen bombs are so much more capable, thousands of times more capable than the nuclear bombs used in 1945.
Yeah.
And there's enough of these to really lead to the deaths of most humans on this planet.
Okay.
Maybe all, it depends on all kinds of things. The second is public health dangers from pandemics.
Oh, tell
so
me
if you
about
think
it.
about a virus that has a long latency period, so it doesn't get detected, it's very contagious. And then after a long amount of time, it's very deadly. So deadlier than Ebola, for example, but hard to detect.
So you mean we might have already got the virus, but it hasn't become really lethal?
That's one possibility. But
Wow.
I think what I mean is that it doesn't take any future technological breakthrough for a pandemic like COVID-19 to happen again, but to be far more infectious, far more deadly, and far harder to develop vaccines against.
Yeah.
And so that is one possibility where humanity goes extinct. And there's a lot of other risk scenarios relating to this, like mirror life, mirror bacteria. Basically, the idea is that so far all life and all bacteria evolved in one particular strand of possibilities of evolution. But if you were to develop a bacteria which has everything mirrored, very different, then all of life on Earth will not have developed the immunity against it because no life will have come across it.
Okay.
So that's one way in which not just all humans, but all living animals could die. So yeah, the pandemic aspect is second. And then the third, I think it depends, right? Like for AI or climate change, generally the current situation would not be an existential threat,
right.
But that doesn't mean that people aren't worried. So one example for climate change, I think it's considered more of a slow burn issue where it might not lead to extinction, but it will still lead to hundreds of millions of people migrating,
right.
Food crises, and maybe runaway climate change relating to the permafrost, all these other scenarios. But then for AI, this is one big uncertainty because the reality is no human knows where AI is going to go. So some people, they think to themselves, oh, this is just a prediction technology and it's a bit like electricity. It diffuses, we develop new inventions, but that's it. Yeah. Other people have a completely different view that gradually AI is being developed in a way where there's a lot of commercial incentives to improve it as much as possible.
Okay.
But then eventually you have a model that has ingested all information that is written on the internet, all videos, all audio, all text, and then it will understand, I don't mean understand in the human sense, but more so in its model, the way that the model weights are developed, it will have ways to ensure that it can never be shut down.
Okay.
Not because we're not saying it's good or bad. It's just that if you are an AI and your
No
goal,
control. Yeah.
if your goal is to help other people,
Yeah.
then the one thing you should try to do is to not get shut down. And we already see this. Apollo Research, all kinds of different groups, they look at these AI models and they're finding the scheming. They're finding the AI models are not revealing the truth.
Yeah.
And this is not science fiction. It's already the case. And so people are projecting forward. Well, if capabilities continue to increase because there's so much money going into this, maybe 5 to 10 years from now, you have an AI that basically copies itself all around the world. And then it starts trying to make sure that it always has access to electricity, it has access to all the computational power, and that it can never be shut down. And then if it thinks to itself, it is better to try to control the electricity supply and the internet and the financial system than to risk getting shut down, basically to take human civilization hostage in order to maintain the AI's continued, it's not a biological existence, but you get what I mean, then maybe we reach a point where you can never go back. And again, people disagree with this. They have all kinds of different views.
Yeah.
But the point is that some of the people who work on this every day in the frontier labs, they're also concerned. They agree that we are creating things where we have no idea where it's going to go, why it works. And so you don't need to believe in any one particular scenario to already be concerned about the fact that nobody knows what's going to happen.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. I like your analysis on how AI can turn into. One analysis that I was thinking about is when AI got control of the electricity, they cannot be shut down. Many countries like US and China, they are starting to use AI in their defense system. For example, they're injecting AI in humanoid robots, in drone attacks, can drop bombs using drone. And the thing is, when AI is self-sustaining, they do not want to be shut down by the creator. There is no guarantee we can control them, right? So at this point, with the rising technology of humanoid robot and how AI is so smart, right? They can calculate better than us. They don't make mistakes. I'm guessing there will be a better soldier than human will ever be. So, should we worried about this? Do you think there is a governance system that can control this? Because many people say that US, who control nuclear power, who control AI compute, are the one who keeping the peace around the world together with NATO. But recently we are seeing that NATO with US is not that friendly anymore. So if with this development where there is AI we cannot control, and then US AI system has been getting less and less advantage than, let's say, China AI system or other country AI system, how can we create a governance that can make sure the peace can still be sustainable with this kind of scenario that we are looking in? Just in January 2026, we are looking at US attack Venezuela and they will get Greenland. Can you share your view on this?
Yeah, so first, there's no silver bullet. We are not guaranteed to survive this year, decade, or century.
Exactly.
There's no golden plan and nobody's in charge. Every politician is improvising, even if they are very good at pretending that they're not. Realistically, it's not going to be any grand design or framework, but more so the careful management of day-to-day affairs that is the crucial aspect.
Okay.
We have to basically get people who have the right values and the preferences to solve these problems to improvise well.
Okay.
And not make mistakes.
Okay.
Realistically, I think there's some things which we can do, like communication between the US and China. Right now, it's sorely lacking. Both sides are trying to limit how much people in their hierarchies are engaging with the other side, unless it's very strictly controlled. If humanity survives the next centuries, I think the most likely scenario is actually because of fear. So if you think about the Cuban Missile Crisis, after those 12 days or so, Kennedy and Khrushchev, Kennedy apparently said that there was
Can you tell about the...
Yeah. So the Cuban Missile Crisis was a situation where the Soviet Union began deploying nuclear-ready warheads to Cuba. Khrushchev did not want to back down, and Kennedy considered doing an invasion, an embargo, basically trying to get these warheads out. And we came very close. Some people would say a 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 chance for total nuclear war.
Wow.
Eventually, the Kennedy administration, I should say, decided to both use a blockade rather than an invasion and to try to negotiate with Khrushchev. And we were lucky enough to have leaders that decided not to use nuclear weapons. But who knows? Maybe the next time around we won't be and we'll be gone. And that'll be the end. But after they came very close, the closest some would say we've come to nuclear war, they set up hotlines. They both agreed that they should find ways to de-escalate.
Right.
And the reason for me is because it's a bit like when a crisis hits, people have an opportunity but not a guarantee to learn. So sometimes people say everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I actually think it's the other way around. Nobody has a plan until they get punched in the face and they survive. And it's the same with technology development. I think we will not have a world government given that nuclear weapons exist. The best hope we have is that while powerful countries will keep developing new offensive technologies, biological, chemical, nuclear weapons, all kinds of different things, eventually they will independently come to the conclusions that the weapons they are developing are so dangerous that, and they both know that the other side knows this, that they have to find a way to halt their arms race, because otherwise everyone's going to die. And I think we will reach that point eventually. And that it is fear, not altruism, that I think will be the cause of global cooperation to prevent existential risks. Because right now, first, powerful countries think to themselves, you don't negotiate while you're winning. And most countries think that they're not going to lose, the ones that are playing this game. But the other is that politicians have so many things to pay attention to that they will only really focus when there's a deadline or when there's a crisis. And that's one area where I think we might come very close to things like biological warfare and nuclear weapons. And then we have to hope that the very few people who get to satisfy their preferences using state power, that they are the kinds of people who realize this might escalate, we have to negotiate. And that's not guaranteed. But I think that the mutually assured destruction, both in a military sense and more recently in an economic and geo-economic sense, is actually a critical foundation for human survival. Because if you know that you cannot checkmate the other without being checkmated yourself, you have an incentive to maybe start negotiating.
Once hopefully they come to realize that very soon, or they already realize, but the winning want to keep winning, so they don't want to negotiate, as you mentioned. So just to continue on that point, I think so far we are lucky that the most powerful person are not using military escalation to compete, but we are seeing that many countries nowadays have, it seems like they are having authoritarian leaders. I want to touch upon the level of democracy that we have nowadays. Has our democracy system failed us? Because it seems like we have a direct election, but we keep, maybe for the one who lose, will say that we keep giving power to those who are very authoritarian. They only think for their constituent, and their constituent might not be representing they might be representing a lot of people, but not everyone wishes. So how do we make sure that our democracy also create a leader who are more willing to create peace?
Well, first, that's a hard question. But I think it's hard to say that the democratic system failed us, because it's more likely that we failed the democratic system.
Okay,
That
tell me about that. Yeah.
It's not the democratic system never called us to give us an offer. Instead, it's simply a process. It's not a determination of an outcome independent of what we choose to do.
Yeah.
So if people vote for politicians that do everything that's against their interest, that's not the fault of the system in itself. That's the fault of what people did in that system. I think to increase the chances for peace, first we have to be realistic about how little most people can do. Most people don't really get a say. We give them one vote out of hundreds of millions in some countries, but realistically, they're not going to be able to change so much. Instead, a lot of it is about what you can do, where you are as the human being you are, with the network and opportunities and skills you have. You can't change the world today, but you can probably change your country in this life if you're serious. And it starts with organizing. I mean, find out what other people want. Find out how you can create teams that can be very competitive in giving people what they want. And ensure that you listen to the reasons why people are unsatisfied. Because I think a lot of the democratic system was dependent upon the weakest link being a lot stronger.
What does it mean?
What I mean is that in a democracy, even if you have, let's say 49% of the voters, they understand the system very well and they're very up to date on things. If you have 51% of the voters that decide that they want a very different system and they don't understand why the promises being made by a candidate are impossible, then it doesn't matter how smart the 49% are. It's the 51% that will win, that will skew the outcome. I'm being very simple here. And I think in a similar sense, after World War II, there was a lot more solidarity between strangers in the same imagined national communities. There was more of an emphasis on let's improve our lives together, the development of the country, the independence. But over time, people became complacent. They started to focus a lot more on what helps me as an individual instead of what helps my community, my country. And I think this has led to a lot of polarization, because people no longer trust that the other people who live in the other part of the country want what's best for them. So I think in some sense, to answer your question directly, if we want leaders that value things like peace better, we have to actually make sure that the people who value peace more outcompete the rivals who value peace less. But that is a very simple statement. What it means in practice is that we have to encourage and help and organize so that the people who are more likely to do what we want are more likely to succeed. Maybe they have more support, more volunteers, and so on. And even then, it's not guaranteed. But right now, the reality is that maybe a vast majority of people in most countries would tend to agree on a lot of the basic principles. So some examples: they want less poverty, more equal opportunity, stable climate, fair distribution of the wealth. But they also feel like, what can I do? I'm just one person. Instead of framing it as, we are the overwhelming majority, and there are things which we can do, which are not individually rational. But if somebody doesn't start, it won't become individually rational for other people. So that's why political change sometimes is very generational. Things have to get bad enough that people who said, I don't care, decide, actually now I care because things are that bad. And then they realize there's so many of them that they manage to change the system. So again, I'm being very simplistic, but I think that people have to focus on what they can do, where they are, with what they have and who they have, and consider being the change they want to see in the world, even if it's not guaranteed.
Thank you, Joel. Many people said that, for example, in Indonesia, there are more people nowadays, or there are many people saying that maybe direct election is not the best idea. Maybe we should put more power to the political party to choose the president, right? Why? Because they would say, oh, the current population of Indonesia are not that educated enough, right? So democracy can only works when people are educated. But I myself disagree with this because even we long time ago, like in the US, they do not start as a country who already have people all graduated from high school to start direct election. They start from civil war, and then they start from war, and then after that civil war, they try to uh, they pass that period, and they keep on holding to democracy and direct election. So maybe this is also like you said, related to misinformation. Like nowadays, there are some people, the who are becoming the gatekeeper of information, and during the election, they can actually make a propaganda that can actually make certain people win the election. So, in this sense, I think the election watcher, the election monitoring organization should be better, or else many of our election people would say, even we already finished the election, the other party who loses said that this is a rigged system. I don't believe the election system. Any idea on how to put trust on national election and democracy better? I mean, we want to make this sustainable, so but the trust is losing day to day because people realize you can just have money and put ads on misinformation. You can create AI people to distribute misinformation. Anyway, or best practice that you maybe have seen that country who are just developing can improve their democracy.
Yeah, so I think first is that the economic development level is not a determinant of the success of democracy. We all know some of the richest countries in the world actually have very polarized political systems that are officially democracies, but really it's a factional battle within the economic elite on who gets to do whatever they want for 4 or 5 years if they win the election.
Yeah.
And it's more about culture, that if you consider countries like Germany and Sweden, 100 years ago, they were a lot poorer than they are today. They still had relatively good universal education.
Right.
And again, these countries were not perfect, and there's a lot of things that went wrong. But I think history shows that you don't need to be a rich country to be a egalitarian, well-functioning, high-trust society that tries to lift all the boats, make the lives of everyone better.
Right.
But I think, again, there's very little that most individual human beings can do in the short term. It starts with organizing. It's always the same. I mean, things like democracy aren't guaranteed. They are temporary concessions that reflect balance of power.
Right.
So these days, most people, they get 1 out of maybe 100 million votes every 4 or 5 years, and then they call that democracy. But for a lot of people, that's a joke. They would say, you call that a democracy? Like, you get to choose whether the left faction or the right faction of the economic elite gets to do whatever they want for 5 years, and you think that's a democracy? Instead of a participatory process where good ideas get shared, bad ideas get open feedback. So a lot of people would say we don't live in a democracy, we live in representative parliamentary systems that are dominated by a small number of the population.
Switzerland has certain where if you have to decide certain things, you should get voice from all the people, right?
Yeah, but again, it's always a question of what is the threshold. Some people would say that is better because it allows for people to have more of a say. It makes it harder to go against the majority. But on the other hand, some people would say even that's not good enough if you don't have, for example, sufficiently good education that you give to the poorest children in the country so that even they can become president if they are willing to do all the work. And so I think that democracy is always a moving target.
Right.
But in some sense, I think the question should be about what you can do where you are.
Right.
There is no silver bullet, gold's plan for how to improve things, but a lot of it starts with a culture of cooperation among strangers.
Right.
Because there's far too many people in any country for you to personally know every single one. So you have to help to create a culture of shared effort to improve the country. And usually that has required a common enemy, like an invader, something else. But these days, I think that people need to start small, start locally, start in your neighborhood, your organization, and then see how it expands from there. But what's very important is that most projects don't scale.
Yeah.
And to scale, you have to think about how is this going to outcompete all the other initiatives? How am I, for example, putting forward an idea that is so good that a stranger who doesn't know anything about me will say, I love that idea so much, I'm going to share it. And
Like
that's
New York mayor said that he will reduce the rent price, and those ideas win a lot of voters.
But there's a difference between telling people what they want to hear that is not possible and telling people what they want to hear that is possible.
Okay,
So
continue. So.
A lot of politicians that want to lower prices for the population, good luck. If it were easy, probably the rivals would have done it. Usually there's far more structural, complicated problems. The other thing is nobody's in charge. We pretend like there's one or two politicians that can do anything. I think it was Kennedy who used to say, before he went to politics, people said just go to the House. Then there was no power, so people said go to the Senate. Then there was no power, so they said become president. Then there was no power. I mean, the world is a very complicated place. Nobody's in charge. Everybody's improvising. And what's important is to be grounded. Like, who am I as a person? What can I do? Who do I know? Who can I organize with?
Right.
Start small, build gradually, try to give people what they want, and keep creating a culture of cooperation that can grow. Because that is the same with a country. I mean, at the end of the day, a country is strangers who will never know each other cooperating in a defined territory and so on and so on. So I think it's similar. Regardless of which country you are, you don't need to be a rich country to be a well-functioning society.
Yeah.
But it's a bit like a huge family. If you had a family with 100 million people, you won't ever have time to talk to every cousin, but you hope that the elders and the people that have more influence will create a culture of cooperation that will allow the family to solve problems that it has to solve, to adapt to a changing world, and to satisfy people's preferences on the kind of life they want to live.
Okay.
And that starts not with the 100 million cousins. It starts with your brothers, your sisters. Start small.
Thank you, Joel. We have already discussed the hard stuff. I want to go to questions on what kind of platform you use or you think it's very important to scale up the organization organizing power of people. You mentioned you use Discord, YouTube, maybe WhatsApp or Telegram. So far, what kind of collaboration platform that are very powerful, but maybe not many people has utilized yet, that can help people to build collaboration to build a better society. Start small, but then scale up in a bigger way, scalable.
Yeah. So first, it depends on what you're trying to do, the context, right? Like people use all kinds of different stuff. In Japan, they use Line, KakaoTalk in Korea, WeChat in China, Viber in the Middle East, WhatsApp in many places. And so if we ask people to use platforms that they have no other reason to use, they're probably going to ignore it. Overall, I think that Discord is one of the more powerful ones. Slack as well, but it's not free in the same sense. People generally tend to use the more straightforward, simple ones. Maybe that's the reason. But again, the best platform is the one that actually allows you to do what you want to do. So in the past, I've organized on all kinds of things. Telegram, Signal, WhatsApp, WeChat, Line, Messenger, Facebook, Slack, Discord,
whichever
Instagram.
works. Yeah.
I mean, it depends on
Yeah.
who you're trying to involve,
Yeah.
because it's the same with the fragmentation of the internet. I mean, it's becoming harder for people that live in very competing countries to
Yeah.
be in the same kinds of chats. There's all
Right.
kinds of restrictions. Governments are trying to actively silence people who disagree with them. So I think it starts with what's the problem you're trying to solve. If you're trying to do things globally, I think that we've seen that different platforms attract different kinds of people.
Yeah.
But I would encourage people to try to think beyond the obvious choice and maybe consider the ones that allow more customizations. You can tailor the platform to the user base.
So the story in the newspaper is about competition between US and China. Sometimes I don't get it because, for example, US China AI race or war, they said that US has 3 to 6 month advantage of computing power or AI development advantage than China. It means that we are in okay condition in terms of stability. But let me ask this scenario. What if China win the AI war? What if China become the biggest economy in the world, in which they are projected to be very, very soon? China is, you have been to China, they have great people. The only thing that the narrative that I see is China has communist, communism and socialist system. So their leader are not elected directly, and this narrative sometimes is twist or spin on to frame that China, if they lead the world, we might be heading to somehow less positive way than if US is leading the world. Of course, the narrative is decided by whoever win, right? Currently, US is still winning, so they can create the narrative that people keep listening. But once China become the biggest economy, once China create their own semiconductor, their own chip factory, they will compete head to head or even better than US. What do you think will happen? What do you think people are worried about? Is it valid, or we still don't know? Or do you think it's better to have a balanced power between US and China, and or what?
Well, I think it depends on the story that you believe in. Some people, they believe in a strategic decisive advantage, that eventually there's a moment in which one of the two countries can checkmate the other. I don't believe it. I think we are heading towards a multipolar world where there are fewer countries that can tell other countries what to do. In some sense, even in 1945, when Europe and Asia was destroyed by war, the US had a nuclear monopoly, half of the world's gold, half of the world's manufacturing output. Even then, the US couldn't tell every country what to do. So I think that this idea that eventually one country, regardless of which one it is going to tell everyone what to do, I just don't buy it. I think that the second is, it depends on what you care about. For example, a world that is where China has a lot more influence, if you care about reducing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions through renewable energy, you might think that's a good thing compared to trying to burn as much oil as possible and slowing the energy transition. On the other hand, if you care about the ability of people to say whatever they want on the internet, maybe you're going to be unhappy. So it depends on what you actually value. And I think the last is that, why is it called an AI arms race? I mean, some people put it this way, but it's a revealed preference. We don't necessarily have to tell the story that, oh, we are in an inevitable struggle for domination and one side's going to win. it is a story that is very useful for people to justify why they need to do what they wanted to do anyway. For example, if you wanted to, let's say you live in a country where most people don't have guaranteed healthcare,
Right.
a lot of people are very poor and struggling, and yet you take their taxes and then you basically give it to some of the wealthiest companies in terms of government contracts, military contracts, and it enriches the very people who own those shares, who are rich already. And you need to do this every year, every election cycle. Then you need to tell a story of why, instead of giving the poor housing, food, and healthcare, you take the money and give it to the richest people. And so if you say we are in a competition with the other country, it's us or them, life or death struggle, then you can avoid the story of, wait a minute, why do we keep giving so much of the money from the poor and the middle class to the richest in terms of the share buybacks and the stock valuations? So it is a story that is, as with all kinds of politics, a lot of it is about which stories become dominant and become too hard for any organized, smart minority to displace as the dominant narrative.
Right.
Some people, like Sean O'Herty at the University of Cambridge, he's written a paper that this US-China arms race is a complete fake story that is only believed in the West. China doesn't really think about it in the same sense. China is not really trying to win the AI race in some sense. It's a lot more focused on preventing foreign leverage against China, coercion, making sure that China has its own influence in other regions. China's prioritizing the global South countries, so to speak, more than the advanced economies that are dependent on US for military support. So I think that we have to always ask ourselves, when people are doing something, whether it is telling a particular story about inevitability, this is just the way it is, this is how the world works, why are they saying that? Are they saying that because they're naive and they're just repeating whatever they were told? Or is it because it's a way to prevent the other stories from getting airtime and attention? Because the reality is that while we do this thing that we call the AI arms race, we have 800 million people in extreme poverty, climate change is getting worse every year, millions of people are dying from preventable diseases, the world is definitely rich enough to end extreme poverty and help all people live at least a kind of standard material life by today's conditions. And yet we are preparing for World War III. We are leaving so many people to suffer every day. It's completely unnecessary. So why is it the case? Partly because this needs to be justified. The deprivation of the world's population from a good life by people who get to call the shots and make the decisions needs to be justified. And so the story is also one of which we cannot give people what they want because what? Because we are in a competition. It's the other country, it's us or them. So again, I'm not saying this is 100% the case. I'm just saying this is an alternative take on why we might have a very dominant narrative instead of the other alternatives.
Okay. Thank you, Joel. So next time we hear these stories, we should be more critical and see who benefit from these stories. Maybe these stories are fiction after all, so we have to think carefully and decide for ourselves about which story we should believe. Now, as you mentioned, few countries has the leverage to influence others nowadays, and the United Nations systems, because nowadays is decaying, losing its power because some countries are leaving the UN system. The US, Donald Trump are imposing tariff to get what he wants from other countries, to negotiate with other countries. Many countries like Global South, Indonesia, ASEAN, we are having some difficulties to negotiate because UN system is hard to reach to voice our interest, and multilateralism is nowadays is just losing its power. So what other alternative would you think is possible for developing countries, global south, to face coercion from bigger countries? Uh, how should we hedge against this risk? How should we prepare governance system to ensure that we can have a negotiation power?
Yeah, so first we have to be transparent that in the short run, it's hard. And if it were easy, we would have done it. I think the second is that it's similar to the other questions. What you can do depends on who you are, what you have, who you're with, and so on. And what's important is that if you're a small country negotiating with a large country, you're going to get blackmailed, bullied, or played. And there's very little you can do. But if you realize actually the majority of the world's countries are small countries, then you have the possibility, the opportunity, but not the guarantee, to create a better negotiating position for yourself.
Right.
So you could think about it in some sense like the European Union as a trading bloc is way larger than any individual member of the EU. So similarly, I think the first is to understand who has common interests. That is the foundation for common positions, which is the foundation for common bargaining power and leverage.
Okay.
So I think there's all kinds of counter strategies of divide and conquer, of preventing, for example, a common African position or common Southeast Asian position.
Yeah.
But the reality is that, unfortunately, it seems like we're going in the direction of become a superpower or die trying. So in a geoeconomic fragmentation, you either have a sufficiently large market to negotiate the access to have the threats of counter tariffs that you actually matter, and then you're at the table, or you're on the menu and you have no say, and you basically have to give the concessions just to maintain the minimum market access for your exports. So in some sense, it's a bit like the saying, we know what we have to do, we just don't know how to get elected after we do it. For any region of the world, work with countries that have common interests, organize, realize that the future doesn't have to be like the past. Just because you were divided in the past doesn't mean you have to be divided in the future. But this is going to require upsetting people who benefit from the status quo. A lot of people would rather be a big fish in a small pond than to be a small fish in a big pond that is collectively a far cleaner and healthier pond. And so part of it might realistically only come through crises. Crises are the great accelerant of human progress in some sense, whether it's war or other things. So I think one of the important questions for young people in particular is, how are you going to do better than the previous generations? So let's take Southeast Asia as an example. Southeast Asia has never been unified in history. It's not like the Roman Empire was existing. On the other hand, if Southeast Asia wants to defend its interests and improve the living standards of people, you need to develop better organization for the people and the well-being and the livelihoods of people in the same region. And right now, it doesn't exist in the strongest form. I'm not saying it's guaranteed, but people need to be thinking about how we're going to outcompete all the previous generations of humankind. Because if that's not the level of ambition, then you're probably going to be irrelevant. Like you're just going to do what the previous generations did, small incremental changes. And in some sense, that's the easy path. But that's why I think ambition is the necessary condition for breakthroughs. Like people who only wanted to be 1% better, they were very unlikely to make something 100% better. So I think what's particularly important for young people that are not in power is to start telling the story, drawing the attention to how we're going to be better organized, wiser and smarter than the previous generations, to organize in a way that hasn't been done before. And a very concrete example is that a lot of countries in Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, South Asia, and Europe, they're all in the common position of, well, we don't want to be squeezed by the US and we don't want to be squeezed by China. Well, if you realize that the US and China together are a small minority of the world population, a minority of the world GDP, and the majority is in the other countries of the world, what are you waiting for? I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but especially the negotiations between the RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Partnership, and the EU, and maybe some other countries like Canada and the UK, it creates a basis for a far larger bloc that is far harder to push around. And I think this is the key. You don't need to agree on everything to agree on the minimum baseline that we will not accept being coerced, being invaded, being colonized,
Right.
set the minimum floor, defend that floor, and be willing to organize very well to make sure that boundary is not crossed.
I see. Very interesting, man. When you say that it's true. It's not easy to organize common interests. Like, for example, in the case of Greenland, U.S. want to take over Greenland. I saw in Twitter where the German soldier come with airplane and landed, and then in several hours they go back, right? But France, on the other hand, they said that we have to do arm practice in the Greenland. So yeah, even in EU itself, who has common interests, right? It seems that different point of view can exist. So yeah, I think I truly agree with you that we should have a minimum baseline for interest and then start from there. Yeah, but I think it's not easy, but we should pursue the path, right? Now, with this kind of, I have two last questions for you. We are seeing that Iran has a new internal conflict, and Iran has nuclear, and U.S. are thinking about intervening Iran, and we are looking about war around the world. There is a saying that if you want to create peace, you should prepare for war. Do you agree with this? Maybe this is true for large countries, big superpower, but how about small superpower? Should they invest in arms race, or what do you think?
Well, the first is that most countries don't get a choice. They live in a world where other people in other countries have way larger tax bases and populations to throw at a war. Maybe it depends on why you are preparing for war. I mean, in some sense, Putin preparing for war has certainly not led to peace because he decided to reveal a preference to use it to start a war.
Okay.
On the other hand, countries that are using it for deterrence, so think about countries like Switzerland and Singapore that have had military service for a long time. It's about not making it impossible, which they can do, but making it so costly that it's not worth trying to invade. And I think that that's kind of the idea behind if you want peace, prepare for war. It's more specifically, if you want peace, make it too costly for the other side to start a war, but the necessary condition is that you yourself don't want to use the capabilities to start a war. So I think it all depends on motivations. The reality is that capabilities matter more than intentions. A country that doesn't want war for one generation, if it builds up great capabilities, maybe eventually they'll change their mind and say, why don't we take that nice part near the Arctic? It looks like there's not so many people.
Right.
Who cares about the other people that live there? For example, colonization. Would colonization have happened if there was a balance of power? I think it depends, but probably not. I mean, if it's too costly to colonize a foreign country, you stop. And it's the same with decolonization. Decolonization didn't happen because people in colonized societies said, please stop. It's because it became too costly for the colonizers to maintain their occupation of people on the other side of the world. So I think this is kind of the key, that costs and benefits and thinking in terms of game theory is useful. And the reality is that the vast majority of people don't want war.
Right.
And they might not be interested in war, but war might be interested in them, because eventually the larger countries in the world that have many times more capabilities than their neighbors, they could choose to try to take over their neighbors tomorrow.
Right.
And then who they're going to call? I mean, there's no global police. So the reality is that smaller countries have more responsibility to use their brains rather than their guns. Build alliances, build capabilities that are asymmetric, that target or are able to target the opponent's weaknesses, but don't expect to match them head to head, pound for pound on their strengths. And I
this
think
is just deterrence.
and I think the other reality is that the great tragedy is that the majority of the world lives in small countries that have failed to organize to maintain the boundary against large countries invading small countries. I mean, it's actually a hugely disappointing failure of humanity that after 2 world wars, we still haven't managed to get the majority of the people in the majority of the countries to say the one boundary we will not let you cross is that a large country invades a small country. It's so basic, but when a large country invades a small country, most countries, they say, our trade ties and these other things. So that is actually about a lack of moral courage, a lack of spine. I mean...
So you said many countries should help Ukraine to stop the war with...
I'm not saying specifically Ukraine. I think it's more about a matter of principle. Let's say, the US invaded Iraq. At some point, the big countries have a long history of invading small countries. And I'm not saying specifically because it's in this region of the world. I'm saying as a matter of principle, the majority of the world lives in small countries. And individually, they are relatively weak and irrelevant compared to large countries. But collectively, they're very relevant. And they failed to defend their interests because they were short-termist or because they were opportunistic. And they said, why should we organize to enforce the boundary? To make it costly for a large country to invade a small country. So in that sense, both basically almost every 10, 20 years, you have a large country invade a small country. You can go to US and Vietnam, both the US and Soviet Union and Afghanistan, US and Iraq, Russia and Ukraine. And every time it erodes the principle, the expectation that small countries will cooperate to maintain their existence. So that forces countries to scramble for the alternative, which is become a superpower or die trying. You either create a hedging strategy, defense unions, partnerships, diversification to prevent coercion, and then you hope that the big countries don't decide to eat you, or you don't have much choice, or you become a puppet state.
Right.
And so I think the great challenge is that first, most people never got a say. Most people are smart, kind, good people that want others to live well, and I have respect for them. But they never got to have a say on what their country's strategy is going to be, whether there's going to be a world war. Instead, the very few people who have been in positions of power and responsibility to make decisions on behalf of and in the name of the rest of the population, they have failed. Yeah. They have failed to organize with people in other countries that have similar interests, to clarify the boundaries, to create the incentive mechanisms, for example, through mutually assured economic damage, to make sure that there are certain boundaries we will not cross. And this is also the scary thing with things like nuclear war, where the vast majority of people would agree we should not have a nuclear war. But what are the serious boundaries? If tomorrow a politician, one of 9 that have nuclear weapons, decides to attack a small country with nuclear weapons, what's going to happen? People are going to call for de-escalation. They're going to suggest the session of the UN Security Council. But please, countries don't stop wars because you say please. They stop because it becomes too costly to continue. The costs become larger than the benefits. And I think small countries have to think in the same way. We need to be credible that if a large country invades a small country, not just individually, but collectively, we will make it so costly for a large country. And this is very, very difficult because there's so many people involved. But it's a principle of human survival.
Right.
If we allow large countries to start swallowing up small countries, why do you think it's going to stop it with one country?
Yeah, it will continue to attack it.
Not
the other countries.
We don't know. Yeah. But I think this is the big tragedy that the majority of the world population
abandon the others. Yeah,
exactly. We have basically abandoned the smaller countries to the larger bullies in the hope that we are not the next ones to be bullied. And this is a failing strategy. It's not the smart thing you would do if you were in a real life classroom, for instance. So I think that we need to make sure the people who want to solve the problems better than previous generations
take care of their neighbor.
They step up, take responsibility, work really hard, don't give up, do better than the previous generations. Show people that you can do better, that you can give people what they want, that there are things we can still do to make the lives of everyone better off. Stop complaining or just tweeting about things. Like, do the work. And I think that's the big problem. Like, so many, for every one person doing the work, how many people are complaining instead of doing the work?
Yeah.
Because I'm not saying you're bad if you're complaining. You're allowed to complain.
Right.
You're just irrelevant. And so the question becomes, do you want to be relevant, solve the problem, and live a better life? Or do you want to be irrelevant and complain and not get anything done?
Right.
So I think this is a big question for every human being, and for myself too.
Right. Thank you for putting that out, Joel. I really like your idea. Last questions is about AI governance. I think you have studied AI governance a lot, and many public policy makers who listen to this podcast might want to know, in terms of AI governance, what are the risks if AI is not governed, and what are the minimum requirements to govern AI? Because many people say that about AI governance, it means that you have to know how to control the AI, but not many people know. Like you said, AI can learn it by itself to be sustainable, right? And there is a lot of issue about AI in terms of hallucination or discrimination or others. So yeah, what are the risks and how to control it? So many people might get the idea about AI governance in concrete.
So the first is that the price of survival is eternal vigilance, and actually more than that, because even if we try to keep up with everything, nobody's in charge, nobody knows what's going to happen. But if we don't govern this, it's like Russian roulette, except with a blindfold and with someone else holding the trigger, because you have no idea what's going to happen, if things are going to blow up in your face, if your electricity grids are going to malfunction, if your financial systems are going to have a lot of problems. So we are trying to keep up with a technology that is becoming far too complex for any human being to understand.
Yeah.
In terms of also all the applications, international dimension. So it's a bit like the analogy of the blind people that are all touching an elephant from a different side and trying to describe it, and they all disagree, but they're touching the same elephant. It's very complicated. Realistically, we have to do what we can where we are with what we have, which means that people have to decide what is worth our scarce time and attention and the funds available. Focus on the threat models. What is the real problem that's worth paying attention to, and what is irrelevant hype? And then what are the root causes and the options, the levers or the policy options that we have to try to tackle these things? And international coordination is particularly important because in many countries, they have more or less good ideas for what should be done. But if you don't trust that other countries are going to follow through, you don't want to be the only country that is going to start to tax your companies for safety regulation and all these things, while the other side does whatever they want. So prisoner's dilemma, free riding, all these things. I think, again, the fundamental point is less about technical policy and more about human identity. If we want to live the best lives we can, we have to stop thinking about these problems as someone else's problem.
Okay.
I don't care, I didn't study this, I don't know the details. You don't need to know the details. The point is that if we don't create a culture where humans that are mostly strangers cooperate to solve problems that matter for all of us, then we are basically praying that there's not going to be a train wreck and a disaster. And that's not a good strategy. So I think there is the object level technical questions on how we design these mechanisms. But what's far more important to me is that we stop wasting time on ideas that don't solve the problem, and we create the necessary cultures of cooperation by telling stories that help people to understand, oh my gosh, it's not about my country or your country or the people from this town or that town. It's about all of us being on the same spaceship that we might call Earth. We don't know where we're going in terms of history. Okay. We don't know what kind of dangers lie ahead of us. We don't have any guarantee that we're going to move to another planet or survive the century. And so the smartest thing we can do is to get the people on the same spaceship Earth
Right.
to understand that we're all in this together. We're all either going to live together or die together.
Right.
We have to solve problems that matter for all of us.
Yep.
It's not going to be easy, but that is the least stupid thing we should do. And this is the more important foundational story than any narrow technical thing of like, what should my individual country do about this individual threat model? That helps. It will be helpful down the line. But if we don't create a story that spreads around the world, that we're all in this together, even if we disagree about all kinds of things, then we are increasing the chances that we're not going to survive.
Thank you, Joel, for sharing that. We have a very interesting talk with Joel, and we learn a lot from AI governance, democracy, how globalization should be, and how multilateralism should be, and how small countries can defend themselves against coercion of big countries. A lot of things we have discussed. Thank you so much, Joel, for coming to this podcast. We should have another podcast, maybe. Thank you so much. So everyone, please stay tuned in Hive Intelligence Podcast. We are going to interview another expert, just like Joel, on different topics. And I hope you enjoy this very podcast. Bye-bye.